From the moment he was born, Achilles carried a prophecy that promised glory and an early death. Yet instead of running from it, he chose to challenge it, and in doing so became the greatest warrior of his age. There are heroes whose names are carved in marble, recited by poets, echoed on the lips of kings. And then there are heroes whose names seem to live inside the bloodstream of the world itself, names that pulse beneath centuries, rising whenever courage or tragedy is spoken. Among those eternal names, one stands alone, blazing like a comet across the ancient sky. Achilles, the greatest warrior Greece ever produced. The man whose footsteps shook battlefields. The man whose rage could break armies, and whose grief could break the gods. But before he became a symbol, before songs immortalized him, before destiny bent itself around his choices, Achilles was something far more fragile. He was a child born into a prophecy, and a prophecy is a dangerous cradle. His story begins not with war, but with fear, the quiet, trembling fear of a mother holding her newborn son. Thetis, a sea nymph of extraordinary beauty and ancient lineage, cradled her infant against her chest, listening to the soft sputtering cries that only a new life can make. His skin glowed with warmth. His tiny fingers curled around hers with a strength far beyond his size. His eyes, though clear, sharp, startlingly aware, opened to look at her as though recognizing something deeper than sight. Thetis had lived for centuries beneath the waves, untouched by time. But in that moment, she felt something mortal in herself. A softness. A vulnerability. The kind that comes only from love, and with the love came dread. Because she knew something no mother should ever know, the fate of her child. The fates had whispered it the moment he entered the world. Their voices, thin as wind threading through reeds, carried a simple truth. He will be greater than all before him. He will be remembered longer than cities stand. He will shape the age of heroes, and he will die young. Thetis clutched her son tighter. No, she whispered. Not you. But fate listens to no one, not even to mothers. Desperate, Thetis searched the world for a way to defy destiny. Some say she carried Achilles to the river Styx, dipping him in its dark waters to shield him from death. Others say she anointed him nightly with ambrosia and held him over sacred flames to burn away what was mortal. Whatever version is true, all stories share the same image, a mother trying to carve immortality into her son's bones. But destiny is not a door that can be locked. It is a river, and rivers find their way. Years passed, and Achilles grew into a child whose presence seemed to stretch the very air around him. His laughter rang like bronze. His temper flared like lightning. His steps, quick, confident, impatient, hinted at a life that would burn fast and bright. His father, Peleus, watched him with pride. But Thetis watched with fear, for each day that Achilles grew stronger, the prophecy grew nearer. It was then that she made the hardest choice a mother could make. She left him. Not because she loved him less, but because she loved him too much. Because she believed that if she remained, Achilles would cling to her, and love would hold him back from the world he was meant to shape. She could not bear to watch him walk toward the edge of destiny. So she retreated to the sea, sinking beneath the waves with a heart heavy as stone. Achilles did not understand. He only knew she was gone, and some part of him hardened. Yet life continued, guided by another hand. Enter Chiron, the wise centaur, teacher of heroes, healer, philosopher, and one of the few beings capable of taming the storm that lived inside the boy. Chiron taught him not only how to fight, but why to fight. Achilles learned the bow, the spear, the sword. He learned the herbs that heal and the ones that kill. He learned poetry and music, the power of words to soothe and devastate. But above all, Chiron taught him this. Strength without purpose is destruction. Purpose without heart is emptiness. Know yourself, Achilles. Only then can you choose your fate. Achilles listened, but he listened like a wildfire listens, absorbing everything, burning through every lesson, but always on the verge of breaking free. As he neared manhood, rumors reached his ears, whispers of a war brewing across the sea. A war sparked by beauty and arrogance. A war that would gather kings, warriors, and legends. The spark was small, but Achilles felt its heat, and something inside him stirred. He felt the pull of fate, the pull of glory, the pull of something he could not yet name. But Thetis felt it too, far beneath the waves. She rose from the sea in a shimmering cascade of foam and sorrow, seeking him after years of distance. She found him on a hilltop, spear in hand, training alone. She had imagined this moment countless times. She thought she would embrace him, explain herself, reveal the prophecy gently. Instead, she saw his face and realized something terrible. He was already nearly the man fate intended him to be, not because she had guided him, but because she had abandoned him. Achilles looked at her with a mixture of longing and resentment. "Mother," he said quietly. Her voice trembled. "Achilles, you must not sail to Troy." Troy. It was the first time she had spoken the name in front of him. He felt the word like a spark striking flint. "Why?" "Your life is a crossroads," she whispered. "If you go to war, your name will echo through thousands of years. Songs will be sung of you. Statues carved. Stories woven. You will be admired, feared, loved." She placed her hand over his heart. "But you will not return." Achilles swallowed. "And if I stay?" "You will live," she said. "You will marry. Raise children. Grow old. Your life will be full, but your name will fade." Silence stretched between them. The sea breathed softly. Achilles looked at his hands, hands built for strength, for speed, for impossible deeds. Hands that felt restless simply standing still. Hands that trembled with a desire for meaning deeper than comfort. "I don't know how to be ordinary," he whispered. Thetis closed her eyes, because she knew. She had always known. "You were not born for a quiet life," she said. "But I hoped I could protect you from the cost of the life you were born for." Achilles felt a sharp ache rise in his chest. "You can't protect me from what I am." Her breath caught. He spoke the words she had feared since the day he was born. "I will go," he said. Thetis felt the prophecy settle on him like a crown of iron. She did not argue, not because she agreed, but because she could not change what had already become truth. She placed her hand on his cheek, one final touch, warm but trembling. "Then take this," she whispered, and she gave him a shield forged by gods, polished with divine fire, shaped in the image of the world. On its surface danced cities, oceans, storms, seasons, life in all its beauty and fragility. It was a reminder that Achilles did not fight alone, that the world was watching, that every strike he made would ripple through time. He lifted it. It felt heavy, not in weight, in meaning. When dawn broke, Achilles boarded the ships bound for Troy. The wind caught the sails. The oars dipped rhythmically into the water. The sea opened before them like a road paved with destiny, and Achilles stood at the prow, hair whipping in the wind, eyes fixed on the horizon as though daring fate to meet him halfway. But fate was already waiting. The fleet sailed for days, then weeks, gliding over a sea that seemed to sense the gravity of the journey. The water was unusually calm, as if even the waves were reluctant to disturb the unfolding fate of the men above. Achilles stood often at the prow, leaning into the spray, letting the wind comb through his hair. The bronze glint of his armor seemed to absorb the sunlight rather than reflect it, as though his presence drew light inward. He did not speak much. He did not boast. He only watched. For Achilles was not merely eager for war, he was listening for something. A call. A purpose. A rhythm he felt in his blood but could not yet articulate. The others interpreted his silence differently. The younger warriors admired him with a kind of awe, whispering about his lineage, his training, his rumored invincibility. The older warriors watched him with a quiet unease, sensing the storm inside the young man. Some men are made for battle, some are driven by it. Achilles seemed born from it. Among the ships, one man kept a careful eye on him, Odysseus, clever and perceptive as ever. While others speculated about Achilles' strength, Odysseus studied something deeper, the way Achilles' eyes darkened when the sea grew rough, the way his fingers traced the edge of his shield as if searching for meaning in its symbols, the way he carried himself with a gravity far beyond his years. "He is not merely a warrior," Odysseus murmured to himself one evening. "He is a thread in a tapestry the gods themselves are weaving." When at last the fleet reached the shores of Troy, dawn painted the sky in soft hues of lavender and pale gold. The beach stretched long and wide, its sand white as freshly ground limestone. The walls of Troy stood in the distance, tall, impenetrable, ancient. They rose from the earth like the ribs of a sleeping giant, watching silently as the Greeks approached. Achilles stepped onto the sand before any other warrior. His foot pressed into the earth with a sense of inevitability. This was the soil fate had promised him. Behind him, thousands of soldiers disembarked, carrying shields and spears, setting up tents, building cookfires. The murmur of the camp swelled quickly, but Achilles heard none of it. He was looking at Troy, at the high towers gleaming in the light, at the banners fluttering atop its battlements. He did not see a city. He saw a challenge, a destiny, a mirror of his own potential, waiting to be shattered or fulfilled. As the camp formed behind him, Achilles remained at the shoreline. Only one man approached him without hesitation, Patroclus, his closest companion, the person who understood him better than anyone else alive. Patroclus walked up to Achilles with an expression of concern wrapped in familiarity. "You've been staring at the city for an hour," he said gently. "Time feels strange," Achilles replied. Patroclus followed his gaze. "Do you fear it?" Achilles shook his head. "No. I fear myself more." Patroclus's eyebrow lifted slightly, but he did not laugh. "You were not born to fear anything." "That is the problem," Achilles murmured. "A man who fears nothing may lose everything without hesitation." Patroclus placed a hand on his shoulder. "Then fear this, at least, rushing toward glory so quickly that you outrun your own heart." Achilles breathed deeply, letting the words sink into him. Patroclus always had that effect, softening the sharp edges, grounding the fire, reminding him that the world was wider than his own legend. Their moment was interrupted by the booming voice of Agamemnon, commander of the Greek forces. He strode toward Achilles with the swagger of a man who believed the war belonged to him. "Achilles!" Agamemnon called, spreading his arms wide. "You have arrived at last. Greece's greatest warrior, my greatest asset." Achilles turned slowly, the sea breeze tugging at his hair. "I did not come to be your asset." Agamemnon's smile wavered. For a heartbeat. Then returned, rigid as bronze. "Call it what you wish. You fight under my banner." Achilles said nothing, but something in the air tightened, a quiet warning, a subtle crack forming in a foundation that had not even begun to bear weight. The tension did not last long. A horn sounded from the Trojan walls, long and low, carrying across the beach. A figure stood atop the battlements, tall, regal, armored in gold. His voice carried effortlessly on the wind. "I am Hector, Prince of Troy. Who among you seeks the glory of dying first?" A murmur rippled through the Greek ranks. Achilles smirked. "A bold greeting," he said. Patroclus folded his arms. "Do not take the bait." But Achilles was already stepping forward, spear in hand, the sunlight glinting on the edge of his shield. Odysseus intercepted him quickly. "Not now," he whispered. "The war has not yet begun. Strategy first, glory later." Achilles' eyes remained fixed on the distant figure of Hector. He felt a surge in his chest, a spark meeting tinder. "This war will stretch long," Odysseus said. "Plenty of time for names to be remembered." Achilles relented. For now, but destiny had taken its first breath. A day passed, then a week, then many weeks. Battles erupted along the plains of Troy, chaotic, fierce, unending clashes that painted the fields with sweat and dust. And Achilles. Achilles did not simply fight. He stormed across the battlefield like a force of nature. His footsteps shook dust into spirals. His spear pierced shields as though they were parchment. His voice, when he roared, rattled the hearts of those who heard it. Warriors fled at the sight of him. Songs were composed about him before the day's sun had set. Whispers spread through both camps. Achilles does not bleed. Achilles does not tire. Achilles cannot be defeated. But Achilles did bleed, not from the body, from the soul. Every victory fed something inside him, something fierce, wild, insatiable. But with each triumph came a growing emptiness, as though glory alone tasted hollow on his tongue. At night he sat silently by the fire, polishing his spear, staring into the flames with a troubled expression that no one but Patroclus recognized. "You fight like a man searching for something," Patroclus said softly. Achilles nodded. "Because I am." "What is it?" Patroclus asked. I don't know, Achilles murmured. But I will know when I find it. Another battle came, and another, and in each one Achilles carved his name deeper into the bones of history. But even fate sometimes waits, watches, bides its time, until the moment is perfect. And that moment arrived when Agamemnon's pride collided with Achilles' purpose. A clash not of swords, but of ego, of fire, of two men who could not bow. That collision would carry Achilles toward the darkest moment of his life, and toward the single choice that would define not just his destiny, but the destiny of Troy itself. The feud began quietly, as great tragedies often do. A single decision, a single insult, a single misunderstanding sharpened by pride. After months of fierce battles, the Greeks captured a Trojan priest's daughter, a young woman named Chryses. She was claimed by Agamemnon as his prize of honor, not for love but for status, for symbol, for the weight of power she granted him in the eyes of his men. But her father, Chryses, came to the Greek camp begging for her release, offering gifts and prayers to all who would listen. He knelt before Agamemnon. He pleaded. He wept. But Agamemnon, bloated with authority and surrounded by those who feared him more than reasoned with him, dismissed the old man with a wave of arrogance. When Chryses prayed to Apollo in grief, the god answered, swiftly and ruthlessly. A plague swept through the Greek camp, silent and invisible at first, then roaring through tents like a firestorm. Warriors fell feverish. Horses collapsed. Even the air thickened with dread. Apollo's arrows of illness struck without mercy. The camp trembled, and at last Agamemnon realized he must return Chryses. But he did not take this loss in humility. He took it in rage, in wounded pride, in a desperate need to reassert his dominance. So he looked for compensation, and saw one thing he believed he could take: Achilles' prize of Briseis. Achilles did not value her as a possession, not as a trophy, not as a symbol. He valued her as a person, someone who had become a quiet presence in his life, easing the sharp edges of war, grounding him in moments when his own fire threatened to consume him. She was gentle where he was fierce, soft where he was hard. Her presence steadied him. Agamemnon did not see any of that. He saw only a rival to humiliate. He summoned Achilles. The sun had barely risen. The sea breeze was cool. The camp's early fires crackled softly as men whispered rumors of what Apollo's plague meant. Achilles entered the command tent with Patroclus at his side, both cloaked in calm determination. Agamemnon stood waiting, arms crossed, chin lifted, surrounded by guards who wore nervous tension like armor. "You called me," Achilles said. Agamemnon nodded stiffly. "You know why." "Say it," Achilles replied. The two men stared at each other, two forces of nature, neither willing to bend. Agamemnon inhaled sharply. "Because Apollo demands the girl I took, I must return her. And therefore," he paused, as though savoring the moment, "I will take yours. Briseis will stay in my care. My honor demands it." A hush fell over the tent. Patroclus stiffened. Odysseus, standing nearby, closed his eyes briefly in dread. Nestor's breath caught. Achilles did not move. He simply asked, very quietly, "You would take from me?" Agamemnon smirked. "I would remind you of your place." Something in Achilles' face changed, not broken, not shattered, but sharpened into a stillness so pure it was colder than anger. "My place," Achilles repeated. "My place, Agamemnon, is wherever glory calls me. But yours," he stepped forward, "is at my mercy." Gasps rippled through the tent. For a heartbeat, the two men stood inches apart, a king by blood and a king by destiny. Agamemnon broke first, stepping back but hiding it beneath a sneer. "You forget your duty. You fight for me." Achilles' voice dropped to a near whisper, the kind of whisper that carries the weight of mountains. "I fight for myself." "Then prove it," Agamemnon snapped. "Hand her over." Achilles' jaw tightened. Every muscle in his body tensed, not with violence, but with restraint. He could kill Agamemnon before the guards blinked. He could end the war in a single heartbeat. He could rewrite fate with his bare hands. But he did not. He turned away. Patroclus touched his arm, reading the storm beneath the surface. Achilles' breath was slow, steady, too steady. The calm before lightning. Briseis was brought into the tent. She looked frightened, not of Achilles, but of the cruelty she saw in Agamemnon's eyes. Achilles stepped toward her. He cupped her face gently. "It is not your fault," he said softly. "You have been caught between the pride of men." She nodded, tears filling her eyes. Achilles lifted her hand to his lips. "You will not suffer. I swear it." And he let her go. Agamemnon grabbed her arm too roughly. Achilles' eye twitched, a flicker of danger, but he remained still. Agamemnon cast one last triumphant glance at him before leaving the tent. Achilles waited until he was gone. Then the storm arrived. He strode out of the tent, voice booming through the camp like thunder. "To arms," he shouted, not the call to battle, but the call to attention. Soldiers emerged from tents, startled and breathless. Captains tightened their grips on spears. Even the wind seemed to pause. Achilles stood before them all, chest heaving with controlled fury. "Hear me," he cried. "I, Achilles, son of Peleus, refuse to fight for a man who dishonors me, dishonors Greece, and dishonors the gods." The crowd murmured. Achilles raised a hand. "I will not raise my spear again. Not for him. Not for any of you." Silence. A silence that stretched like a blade. Achilles spoke one final sentence, soft, steady, lethal. "Let the Greeks die without me." He walked away. He removed his armor. He sheathed his sword. He stepped out of the war. And with that single act, the balance of the entire conflict shifted. The Trojans surged. The Greeks suffered. The tide turned. All because one man refused to fight. But fate does not rest. Destiny never sleeps. And suffering has a way of finding cracks in even the strongest man's resolve. For Achilles believed he could abandon war. He believed he could distance himself from fate. He believed he could choose peace. But fate found him with a single, devastating blow. Not aimed at him. Aimed at the one he loved most. Patroclus. The moment that name crossed into tragedy, Achilles' world would shatter. And from the pieces, something monstrous would rise. For a time, the Greek camp lived in two worlds. In one world, men struggled, bled, and fell beneath Trojan spears. The tides of war shifted against them with relentless force. Hector's name began to grow in whispers, a sun rising over a darkening horizon, a warrior whose presence steadied his people and terrified his enemies. Each day he led his soldiers like a living wall of bronze, cutting through Greek ranks with calm, practiced precision. In the other world, quiet, secluded, removed, Achilles remained inside his tent. No battle cries reached him. No pleas stirred him. He sat alone, polishing armor he no longer wore, sharpening a spear he refused to raise. Rage smoldered beneath his calm exterior, but it was not the rage of a man eager to kill. It was the rage of a man betrayed. His pride had been wounded more deeply than even he realized. His honor violated. And though honor may seem a brittle thing to mortal minds, to Achilles it was the axis upon which his entire identity turned. He believed himself the greatest warrior of his age. He believed his name would echo through time. And now, Agamemnon had attempted to diminish him. Better to let the Greeks suffer, Achilles thought, than to submit. Patroclus watched this slow burn with a growing heaviness in his chest. He understood Achilles in ways others did not. He knew the pride was real, but behind it, deeper, hidden from the world, lived something far more delicate, a fear of losing himself. Achilles had always wanted one thing more than glory, meaning. And the betrayal had shattered the fragile balance between purpose and reputation. Patroclus approached him one evening, when the sun bled red across the horizon and shadows stretched long over the sand. "You cannot stay in here forever," Patroclus said softly. Achilles did not look up. "Watch me." Patroclus sat beside him, knees drawn up. "The Greeks are dying." "They chose their king," Achilles said. "Let him save them." "You know he cannot." Achilles said nothing. The silence between them was not comfortable. It was heavy, heavy with the weight of everything left unsaid, heavy with the weight of what Patroclus feared would come. Finally, Patroclus murmured, "You're punishing the wrong people." Achilles' jaw tightened. His eyes flicked upward, just once, revealing an entire storm behind them. "I am punishing the one who insulted me," he said. "Then strike only him." Achilles exhaled, long, slow, bitter. "If I do that, I become the villain of every song. Agamemnon wronged me, yes, but I would be condemned for killing a king." Patroclus looked at him with a mixture of love and frustration. Since when do you care about how songs portray you? Achilles paused, and Patroclus understood, in that moment, how deeply the prophecy coiled inside Achilles' mind. Achilles cared about songs, not because he loved praise, but because the songs were all the future would remember of him. He cared because songs were the closest thing to immortality he would ever hold. Patroclus leaned closer. You are not a god, Achilles. You do not need to live like one. Come back to the world of men. Achilles clenched his fists. Without honor, who am I? He whispered. Patroclus did not answer. Achilles already knew. Patroclus touched his hand, just a brush, just enough. Achilles closed his eyes, the touch grounding him for a moment, centering him. But fate, it seems, had marked this moment for the beginning of tragedy. The next day, the Trojans broke through the Greek defenses. Not chipped away, not pressured, broke through. Like a river bursting from a shattered dam, they swept across the camp's edge, driving Greek soldiers into disarray. Panic rose like smoke. Men fled. Armor clattered. The black ships that had carried them across the sea suddenly felt like coffins waiting to be lit. And at the center of this chaos was Hector. His presence was calm, deliberate, inevitable. Every command he issued steadied his soldiers. Every strike opened the Greek lines further. Dust and bronze and sweat blended into a haze that swallowed the battlefield. The Greeks faltered. They faltered hard. Shouts carried across the camp. We need Achilles. Where is Achilles? Without him, we're doomed. But Achilles did not emerge. He sat in his tent, head bowed, hearing everything, regretting nothing, or trying not to. Patroclus burst inside. His face was pale. His breath came fast. They're burning the ships, he gasped. If the ships go, we all die here. Achilles didn't move. Patroclus stepped closer. Achilles, please. If you ever fight for anything, fight for them now. Achilles looked up slowly. There is no fight left in me, he said quietly. You're lying, Patroclus replied. Achilles did not snap. He did not shout. His voice was soft, almost fragile. Every part of me wants to fight. Every part of me burns for it. But if I return now, Agamemnon wins. He took from me. He humiliated me. If I return at his command, I join the chain he tried to lock around my neck. Patroclus stepped back slightly, realizing something with a hollow ache. Achilles could not break his own pride, not even to save lives. So Patroclus made a decision carved from desperation, from love, from a belief that he could fix what Achilles could not. Then let me go, Patroclus said. Achilles blinked slowly. Go? In your armor. Achilles froze. Patroclus continued, voice trembling with urgency, let the Greeks believe Achilles has returned. Let the Trojans fear your shadow. I'll drive them back, not as you, but as your hope. As your presence. Achilles' throat tightened. It's too dangerous. That is war, Patroclus said gently. Achilles shook his head. No. It's too dangerous for you. Patroclus understood that too. The unspoken truth. Achilles could endure the loss of honor. He could endure pain. He could endure solitude, but he could not endure losing Patroclus. Patroclus placed a hand on Achilles' cheek, a gesture so tender, so human, that even the gods turned their faces away in respect. I will come back, Patroclus whispered. Achilles swallowed. No prophecy has ever mentioned you. I don't know what fate has planned for you. Patroclus smiled softly. Then perhaps I am free from fate. Achilles exhaled, a shuddering breath filled with fear, love, and resignation. He allowed Patroclus to don his armor. Each piece that Patroclus lifted, the greaves, the breastplate, the helmet with its iconic horsehair crest, weighed heavier than bronze. Achilles' heart hammered against his ribs as Patroclus transformed into his likeness. Achilles walked to him. Their foreheads touched. Return to me, Achilles whispered. Patroclus' voice was steady. Always. Achilles handed him his spear, the spear forged by Chiron, the one only Achilles could wield with full force. Patroclus held it carefully, reverently, and with that, he ran onto the battlefield. When the Greeks saw Achilles' armor, a cheer rose so loud it silenced fear. When the Trojans saw Achilles' armor, dread rippled through their ranks. And Patroclus, brave, gentle, loyal Patroclus, charged like a star falling toward earth. Achilles remained at the entrance of his tent, watching the battlefield through burning eyes, his chest rising and falling with every heartbeat Patroclus risked. He did not know, could not know, that this moment was the hinge of his life, that the choices made in these breaths would shape all ages to come, that before the sun touched the horizon again, a grief older than war would take him, and the world would tremble beneath the weight of Achilles' wrath. Patroclus rode into battle wearing the likeness of a legend. The sun caught Achilles' bronze armor and set it ablaze with brilliant light. Greek soldiers, weary and demoralized moments ago, erupted into hope at the sight. A roaring cheer rose behind him, rippling across the battlefield like the first burst of wind before a storm. Achilles has returned. Look, the son of Peleus fights again. We are saved. Patroclus heard the cries and felt their hope surge through him. It emboldened him, not with the arrogance of a warrior, but with the heartbeat of someone who wished to protect. He had not sought glory. He sought to give the Greeks a chance to breathe. He sought to return life where death encroached. His courage was not born of pride, it was born of love. But the Trojans did not know that. To them, the figure in brilliant bronze was Achilles, the unstoppable force, the one who tore through armies like lightning through storm clouds. Panic thundered across their lines. Men faltered, shields trembled, and the bravery Hector had so carefully cultivated began to crack. Even Hector, far on the battlefield's opposite end, felt dread coil tight in his chest. Achilles, he murmured, gripping his spear. So he has come at last. Hector had known this moment would arrive. Troy had known. The gods themselves had whispered of it. Achilles was the horizon that could not be outrun, the wave that would one day break upon them all. But Hector's courage was not fragile. It did not shatter, it tightened its grip. Then today, Hector whispered to himself, I face the storm. But before the storm reached him, Patroclus tore through the Trojan line with fierce, astonishing speed. He fought not like Achilles, but like himself, graceful, precise, kind even in the rage of battle. He struck shields and spears with force, but without cruelty. He fought not to annihilate, but to defend. He was a bright flame in Achilles' armor, a guiding light rather than a consuming fire. He pushed the Trojans back from the ships, step by step, strike by strike, breath by desperate breath. The Greeks rallied behind him, pushing forward with renewed strength. The ships were saved. The camp steadied. Even the air seemed to tremble with relief. But Patroclus' charge carried him further, too far, because as the Trojans receded, something swelled in him. Not pride, exactly. Not desire for glory. But momentum. The rhythm of battle. The hope he felt from those behind him. The echo of Achilles' fire in his borrowed armor. He forgot, for a moment, the warning. He forgot, for a moment, the edge of fate. He pursued the Trojans all the way to the gates of Troy. It was there, at the very threshold of an empire, that Apollo watched him. The god leaned against a pillar of air, arms crossed, expression unreadable. A mortal wearing Achilles' armor was an insult to fate. A disruption to the delicate script the gods had woven. Patroclus was not meant to be here. Apollo stepped forward. A whisper of divine power brushed Patroclus back. A sudden haze clouded his vision. His limbs felt unfamiliar. His grip faltered. His breath stuttered. He shook his head, trying to clear it. But fate had found him. A Trojan warrior named Euphorbus saw the opening. Skilled, but young. Brave, but eager. He lunged. His spear struck Patroclus in the side, not a killing blow, but a deep wound that stole his balance. Patroclus stumbled. He dropped to one knee. The world dimmed around him. And then Hector stepped forward. He had realized the truth. This was not Achilles. The movements were too gentle, the strikes too measured, the soul behind the eyes too kind. Hector lowered his spear. Who are you? He asked softly. Patroclus wavered on his feet. His voice was weak but steady. A friend of the man you fear. Hector nodded, sorrow blooming in his chest. Not triumph. Not satisfaction. Sorrow. This was never meant for you, Hector said. Why come here, wearing death that isn't yours? Patroclus smiled faintly. Because he would not. Hector inhaled deeply, closing his eyes for a brief moment. Then, because duty demanded it, because the world had turned, because fate had already chosen, he thrust his spear. It struck Patroclus in the belly. Patroclus gasped, once, sharply, and fell to the ground, Achilles' armor gleaming around him like a shell abandoned by its rightful spirit. Hector knelt beside him, whispering words the world would never hear. But Patroclus still breathed. Weakly, barely. His voice was a shiver. Hector, you will not escape him. Hector bowed his head. I know. And Patroclus' final breath left him. When he died, the world did not roar. The sky did not split. The sea did not rise. It was quieter than a leaf falling. Quieter than a sigh. Quieter than the space between heartbeats. But far away, in a tent on the Greek shore, Achilles felt something inside him tear. He did not know what. He did not know why. He only knew that the world shifted in a way that made it hard to breathe. Moments later, a messenger ran toward his tent with wild eyes and trembling hands. Achilles stood before he reached the entrance. What happened? Achilles demanded. The messenger opened his mouth. And Achilles knew before the words formed. His face emptied. His body stilled. The world dimmed. He did not breathe. He did not blink. He only whispered, "No." The messenger fell to his knees. Patroclus is gone. Achilles staggered backward as though struck by a spear. The shield slipped from his fingers. His knees buckled. He fell into the sand, breathless, weightless, broken. A sound tore from his throat, raw, wordless, primal. A sound so filled with grief that even the waves paused. So filled with pain that even the gods turned away. For this was not the cry of a warrior. It was the cry of a man who had lost half his own soul. Achilles clawed the earth with trembling hands. He pressed his face to the ground as if trying to bury himself with Patroclus. His chest convulsed. Tears, real, human tears, carved lines down his dust-covered cheeks. He whispered Patroclus' name again and again, as if saying it might bring him back. The camp fell silent. No man dared approach. Even Agamemnon watched from a distance, a sliver of shame flickering behind his arrogance. Achilles rose slowly, painfully, as if lifting the weight of mountains on his shoulders. His face was streaked with tears, his jaw clenched with unbearable grief. He whispered one sentence, barely audible. "Bring me my armor." Odysseus approached cautiously. "Achilles, your armor is with Hector," Achilles said, voice hollow. "Then bring me new armor. And bring it quickly." His hand tightened around his spear until his knuckles whitened. "I will not eat. I will not sleep. I will not speak to any man until Hector is dead." Odysseus swallowed. "Achilles, wait." "No," Achilles snarled. "You have waited long enough for me. Now fate will not wait for him." He looked toward Troy. The horizon shimmered, but Achilles' gaze was sharp enough to pierce it. "I will make the earth tremble," he said. "I will make the sky mourn. I will make the gods remember me." And with those words, Achilles, broken, blazing, unstoppable, stepped into the path fate had laid before him. Night fell across the Greek camp like a heavy curtain, but Achilles did not feel its darkness. His grief eclipsed even the night sky. He moved through the camp as though wrapped in a storm of his own making, silent, trembling, hollow-eyed. Men stepped out of his path not out of respect, but fear. They had seen Achilles angry before. They had seen him furious. But this grief sharpened his presence into something unrecognizable. Grief had made him cold. Loss had made him clear. Love had made him unstoppable. He went straight to his tent and knelt beside the lifeless body of Patroclus. His hand shook as he touched the cold cheek, brushing away sand that clung stubbornly to the skin. Achilles' breath caught in his throat, cracking like a brittle branch. "You were my gentlest half," Achilles whispered. "And I was too proud to protect you." His voice broke. He leaned forward until his forehead rested against Patroclus' chest. For a long time Achilles did not move. The entire camp waited in silence, breaths held, hearts clenched. They knew Achilles was no longer part of their army. He was now a force the gods themselves had to reckon with. When Achilles finally rose, it was as though he had shed the last remnants of humanity. He was pale, hollow-cheeked, trembling with a violence that did not yet have a shape. His hair hung in loose fraying strands. His eyes, those brilliant, storm-lit eyes, burned like the last embers before a wildfire. He walked until he reached the edge of the camp, where the sea lapped quietly at the sand. Then he lifted his face to the sky and called out a name. Mother. The waves responded instantly, a low, trembling rumble, and then the water rose, not as a wave, not as a spray, but as a figure, tall, luminous, shimmering with seafoam silver and moonlit sorrow. Thetis emerged from the water. Her face was etched with grief deeper than the ocean floor. She reached out, touching Achilles' cheek with fingers that trembled like currents against the shore. My son, she whispered. Achilles' voice cracked. He's gone. Thetis' eyes filled with tears, rare, precious, divine tears that glimmered like pearls before dissolving into the sea. She pulled Achilles against her like she had when he was a child, her hand smoothing his hair, her lips pressed to his forehead. I warned you, she breathed. I knew this pain would come. Achilles' voice shattered. It hurts more than dying. Thetis hugged him tighter. Because he was your heart. Achilles' body shook violently in her arms. Give him back. Please. Mother, please. Thetis closed her eyes. I cannot. Even gods cannot undo death. Achilles' breath hitched, and he leaned into her, eyes squeezed shut as grief ripped through him again. After a long moment, Thetis forced herself to say the words she dreaded. You cannot stay in this sorrow. Achilles lifted his face. Then what am I to do? Thetis cupped his jaw. You have one path now. The one fate carved for you from birth. He didn't answer, but she saw the understanding in his eyes. Then give me armor, Achilles whispered. Armor that can withstand the rage of gods. Armor that can meet Hector. Thetis' expression hardened with resolve. I will. And she vanished into the sea. The waves quieted. The beach stilled. Achilles stood alone again, but the space around him no longer felt empty. It vibrated with expectation, with promise, with destiny. Far below the ocean's surface, deeper than mortal lungs could survive, deeper than sunlight could dream to reach, Thetis descended into the glowing realm of Hephaestus, the god of the forge. There, beneath mountains of volcanic fire, she pleaded with the smith god. Hephaestus, she said, forge for my son the greatest armor the world will ever know. Armor worthy of one who meets fate without flinching. Hephaestus steadied her with eyes of molten gold. Your son's destiny will scorch the world. But I will help him. His hammer rose, and the forge ignited. The clang of metal thundered like a heartbeat. Sparks flew like fallen stars. Molten bronze, gold, and celestial fire poured together as Hephaestus shaped a shield not merely for war, but for the story of existence itself. On its surface he forged fields where farmers tilled the earth, cities bustling with music and struggle, rivers winding like silver veins, constellations sweeping across the sky, dances at weddings, crying at funerals, storms at sea, mothers cradling children, men drunk with victory, men broken by loss. Life, he forged life, because Achilles would soon be the taker of many, and the shield reminded him of all that was worth protecting. The armor was beautiful beyond mortal comprehension. It hummed with divine presence. It glowed as if lit from within. It could not be pierced by arrow or spear, save by one that carried fate itself. Thetis emerged from the sea at dawn, the divine armor cradled in her arms. Achilles had not slept. His eyes lifted slowly. When he saw the armor, a breath left his lungs, a breath filled with awe and sorrow and resolve. Thetis dressed him herself. Each piece she secured felt like another layer of childhood falling away, another step into the man he was destined to become. When she placed the helmet on his head, she hesitated. I will lose you, she whispered. I always knew I would. Achilles placed his forehead to hers. I will live long enough to avenge him. Thetis closed her eyes. That is not life, she said. It is purpose, Achilles replied. And those words became his truth. He took his spear, his sword, his shield, every movement slow, deliberate, filled with weight. The Greek soldiers felt the shift in the air. They stepped out of their tents in stunned silence. The sunlight struck Achilles' new armor and turned him into a figure so bright he seemed carved from the sun itself. Even Agamemnon held his breath. Odysseus whispered, "He is not a man anymore." Men moved out of his path instinctively, as though their bodies recognized a force greater than themselves. Achilles did not look at any of them. He walked straight to the battlefield. The Trojans saw him approach, and their courage fractured. "Achilles," they murmured. "The real Achilles. He has returned." Hector stood on the ramparts of Troy, watching the figure blaze across the fields like a second sunrise. The prince's heart thudded once, hard and heavy. "My fate," Hector whispered, "has come for me." Achilles broke into a run. Not a sprint, not a charge. A descent, like a god falling from the heavens, unstoppable, inevitable. And when he entered the battlefield, the world changed. When Achilles stepped onto the battlefield, the earth beneath him seemed to tense, as if bracing for what was about to unfold. Dust curled away from his feet. The wind twisted around him in uneasy spirals. Even the sun dimmed slightly, as though unwilling to shine too brightly upon the carnage that was coming. The Greek soldiers followed behind him at a distance, hesitant, reverent. They had never seen Achilles like this. They had seen him fierce. They had seen him triumphant. But never silent. Never cold. Never with grief hollowing his eyes into something unrecognizable. Achilles no longer looked like a warrior. He looked like doom wearing armor. The Trojans felt it before they saw him. A pressure. A heaviness in the air. Horses whinnied nervously. Shields trembled in men's hands. The noise of battle faded into a strange, ringing quiet. Then Achilles' new armor caught the sun, and the battlefield erupted into panic. "Achilles! He's come for us! The son of Peleus lives!" Some dropped their spears. Some ran. Some froze in place, knees buckling beneath them. Achilles said nothing. He held his spear low, its point grazing the ground as he walked. Each step was a sentence spoken by fate. Each breath was a promise of death. He gazed at the Trojans not with hatred, but with grief, sharpened into resolve. His silence terrified them more than any war cry ever could. The first Trojan who dared face him rushed forward with a trembling spear. Achilles didn't even bother lifting his shield. He sidestepped, grabbed the man by the throat, and hurled him aside like driftwood. The soldier hit the earth and did not rise. Another charged. Achilles answered with a single thrust, clean, precise, devastating. He moved like a man dancing with death, each motion inevitable, each strike final. But this was not savagery. This was purpose. Achilles did not mutilate. He did not torment. Every kill was swift, merciful in its own terrible way. His fury was not chaos. It was clarity. He cut through the Trojan ranks like a blade through water. Where he passed, shields split. Spears snapped. Men stumbled back as if struck by an invisible force. And all the while, Achilles whispered under his breath, whispers only he could hear. "For Patroclus! For Patroclus! For Patroclus!" The name steadied his hand. It steadied his grief. It turned pain into precision. Soon, the battlefield became a storm. Achilles waded through it like a man who had already crossed the line between mortal and myth. The Greeks followed at a distance, afraid to get too close, afraid of catching the edges of his wrath. But there was one force on the field that did not fear him, the river's commander. As Achilles cut down Trojans, their bodies fell into its waters. The river's surface grew thick with blood and limbs, a sight that filled the ancient god who lived within it with revulsion and anger. Rivers carry life. Rivers cleanse. But today, Achilles made Scamander a graveyard. The river god rose, a massive shape forming from swirling water, foam turning into a face, currents shaping limbs. His voice roared across the plain. "Achilles! Enough!" Achilles turned toward the river with cold eyes. "You defile my waters," the river god thundered. "You slaughter without end. You drown my depths in death. Leave this field." Achilles raised his chin. "Then stop me." It was not a challenge. It was a truth. The river surged forward, a wall of water rushing toward Achilles with furious speed. Men screamed. Horses reared. The Greeks scattered. Achilles braced himself, planting his feet in the earth. The wave struck him, engulfed him, dragged him under. The world became water, churning, crushing, suffocating. Achilles fought upward, kicking, pushing, punching through the current. The river god tightened around him, currents curling like hands seeking to drown a man fate had promised immortality in song, not in life. You are a stain upon this land. Scamander roared. You bring only grief. Achilles forced his head above water and gasped. Then drown me. The river surged again, furious. But the gods were watching. Hera saw the danger first, whispering urgently to Hephaestus. The smith god answered with flame. Fire erupted along the banks, a wall of scorching heat that made the river recoil in pain. Steam exploded upward in great hissing clouds. Scamander retreated, boiling in places, thrashing against the flames. Achilles crawled from the river's grasp, dripping and breathless but alive. He stared back at the churning water with understanding. Even nature mourned Patroclus. Even nature hated what war had made him. But Achilles had no room for guilt anymore. Only purpose. He rose, water streaming off his armor like molten light. His hair clung to his face. His eyes, still burning with grief, lifted toward Troy, toward the gates, toward the man he sought. Hector, Achilles whispered. The name seemed to ripple through the air, carrying across the battlefield in a whisper every soldier felt but could not trace. Hector, standing atop the battlements, felt it like a chill crawling up his spine. He knew Achilles was coming. He knew this was the moment every prophecy, every omen, every restless night had warned him of. He kissed his wife goodbye. He touched his son's hair one last time. He looked into Andromache's eyes and saw her sorrow. Then he stepped out onto the field. Alone. Achilles marched forward. Every step thundered. Every breath was a vow. Both men walked toward their fate, toward each other, toward a meeting that would bring the world to stillness. And beneath the weight of destiny, even the gods held their breath. The air between the Greek camp and the Trojan walls felt strangely thin, as if the world itself were drawing in a breath it dared not release. Even the dust on the plain seemed to hesitate, hanging suspended in the late afternoon light. Men on both sides fell silent. Shields lowered. Spears dipped. Horses shifted uneasily but made no sound. The battlefield waited. Achilles walked toward Troy with the unhurried steps of a man who had already accepted his own death, not today, perhaps, but soon. His armor glowed brilliantly, reflecting the sky in shifting patterns across its divine surface. His hair, still damp from the river's fury, clung to his neck. His eyes were hollowed by grief, yet sharp with purpose. Hector stepped out from the gates alone. No army followed him. No soldiers flanked him. No god shielded him. He wore simple armor, not gilded, not ornate. The bronze was dented from years of battle, the leather straps darkened with sweat and age. His spear was steady in his grip, though his hand trembled ever so slightly. His face bore the weight of a man who understood both honor and inevitability. The gates shut behind him with a resonant thud. He did not look back. Achilles saw him. A long breath escaped Achilles' chest, a breath filled with hatred, with sorrow, with unbearable love for the man who had died because Achilles refused to fight. Patroclus' name pulsed in Achilles' mind like a single, slow heartbeat. Hector took a step forward. Achilles took a step forward. Between them, the space seemed to shrink and deepen all at once. Achilles spoke first, his voice quiet but carrying effortlessly across the plain. You took from me what I loved most. Hector swallowed. His voice was lower, but steady. I defended my city. I defended my people. I fought the man who wore your armor. You knew it wasn't me, Achilles said. Hector hesitated, a second too long. I did, Hector admitted. The truth struck Achilles like a blow. He staggered a half step, not from weakness but from the piercing clarity of that confession. All the pain he'd been holding, all the grief, all the rage, focused into a single point of white-hot intensity. You killed him anyway. Hector's jaw tightened. His gaze lowered for a moment, just briefly. He came too far, Hector said. Too close to our walls. I could not let him live. It was war. Achilles' voice hardened. War does not excuse cowardice. Hector flinched, not from the insult, but from the truth layered within it. The truth that he had seen the kindness in Patroclus' eyes even in the heat of battle. The truth that he had struck a man who tried to save rather than destroy. "I will not beg," Hector said quietly. "But I will not run either." Achilles lifted his spear. The gesture was smooth, controlled, chillingly calm. "Today," Achilles whispered, "you will." Hector's breath caught. His heart pounded. He felt the weight of his wife's hands, the warmth of his son's cheek, the echo of his father's blessings. He felt the entire city behind him, not watching, not cheering, simply holding its breath as their greatest defender faced the wrath of the world's greatest warrior. Then Achilles charged. Hector's instincts overruled his pride. He turned and ran. The watching world gasped. The Prince of Troy, noble, steadfast, honorable Hector, fled. Not out of cowardice, not out of shame, but because he knew Achilles could not be fought in that first instant. Achilles moved like fire, like wind, like a weapon sharpened by grief itself. Hector ran not to save himself, but to find the right moment to strike. Achilles chased him with terrifying speed. Dust exploded beneath their feet as they circled the walls of Troy, once, twice, 3 times. The Trojans watched from above, tears streaming from some eyes, prayers whispered from others. They saw Achilles gaining ground with every stride, relentless, silent. On the third circuit, Hector stumbled for the briefest heartbeat. Achilles seized the moment. He lunged forward, grabbing Hector's helmet crest, the horsehair plume that marked him as Troy's greatest defender. The strap cut into Hector's throat, choking him. He tore the helmet free and flung it aside, sending it skittering across the dirt. Hector spun, gasping, face flushed, and saw Achilles closing in. "Stop!" Hector shouted, voice cracking. "Face me!" Achilles slowed. For the first time, he stopped moving. The world shrank to the two of them standing 5 paces apart, dust settling around them like snow, air heavy as dusk. Hector planted his feet, raised his spear, and steadied his breath. He found calm the way a man finds it at the very edge of death, a clarity born of accepting the truth he could no longer outrun. Achilles watched him with an expression that was not hatred, not fury, not satisfaction. It was grief. Deep, bottomless grief. "You stole my future," Achilles whispered. "You took from me the only thing that made this cursed life bearable." Hector's eyes softened. It was the first time he looked at Achilles not as an enemy, not as a rival, but as a man broken by loss. "I am sorry," Hector breathed. The words hit Achilles' heart harder than any spear could. For a moment, a single, fragile moment, something inside Achilles trembled. But grief is a blade with no handle. It must cut. "You are sorry," Achilles said, "but you must still die." Hector nodded. "Then let it end." Hector cast his spear first, a precise, powerful throw that sliced the air toward Achilles' heart. But Athena, unseen, guided it aside. The spear clattered harmlessly to the ground. Hector's face drained of color. He understood then, the gods had abandoned him. Achilles hurled his spear with impossible force. Hector dodged, barely, and the weapon embedded itself in the earth behind him. Achilles was already moving, closing the space between them in a blur of divine fire. Hector drew his sword. It glinted weakly in the fading light. Achilles lifted his own, a blade forged for war, for destiny, for this single terrible moment. Their swords clashed once. The sound rang out like the crack of a dying star. They clashed again. Steel against bronze. Breath against breath. Life against destiny. But Hector was tired. Wounded. Alone. Achilles was none of those things. With a final, devastating strike, Achilles drove his spear through Hector's chest. Hector gasped, air leaving him in a slow, trembling exhale. His knees buckled. Achilles caught him, not gently, not cruelly, but with the solemnity of a man receiving the weight of his own fate. Hector's voice was faint. "Please, return my body to my family." Achilles' jaw tightened. "I cannot," he said. "You denied Patroclus his dignity. You will not have yours." Hector closed his eyes, and Achilles lowered him to the ground. The plain fell silent. There were no cheers, no triumphant shouts, no songs sung in victory. It felt like a funeral. Achilles stood over Hector's body for a long time, his breath shuddering, his grip shaking. He had killed the man he blamed for everything. Yet instead of satisfaction, something inside him hollowed further. Revenge, he realized, was a well without water. He knelt beside Hector's body, touching the bronze chest plate, feeling the stillness within. "None of this brings him back," Achilles whispered. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of dust and salt. The war was far from over, but Achilles' heart was already breaking further open. Achilles stood over Hector's body while the world held its breath. The sun lowered itself in the sky as though unwilling to witness what came next. Dust drifted in slow spirals around the two fallen figures, the dead prince of Troy, and the living ghost of a man consumed by grief. Patroclus' name pulsed inside Achilles, echoing in the hollow space that replaced his heart. He had killed Hector. Fate had been fulfilled. And yet, the emptiness remained. A colder, deeper emptiness than any he had known. Hector's final plea still lingered in the air. "Please, return my body to my family." Achilles had refused. Now, that refusal hardened into something crueler than he intended, not out of hatred for Hector, but hatred for the void that consumed him. He bent down, his fingers digging into Hector's lifeless ankle. The armor clinked softly. Achilles inhaled, a long, trembling breath that came out as something close to a sob disguised as fury. "You took him from me," Achilles whispered to the dead. "You took the one person I could not live without." He tightened his grip. "And you expect mercy?" Achilles rose, dragging Hector's body behind him. The dust clouded in his wake, swirling like a shroud. Every Greek soldier watched, silent, shaken, not by the brutality, but by the unbearable grief driving it. Achilles tied Hector's body behind his chariot, not gently, not ceremoniously, but with a shaking, haunted anger meant for fate itself, not for the man he bound. Then he climbed into the chariot, lifted the reins, and spoke a word so softly only the horses heard. "Go." The chariot lurched forward, and Hector's body followed. The Greeks lowered their eyes. Some turned away. Odysseus closed his, feeling the sickness of inevitability. "To defy death is one thing," Odysseus murmured. "But to defy the honor of the dead, that invites punishment from gods and men alike." Achilles did not hear him. He did not see the horror on his companions' faces, nor the grief etched into the eyes of soldiers on both sides. He rode along the walls of Troy, dragging the fallen prince in a cruel arc, the dust rising in choking plumes behind him. The Trojans watched from the battlements, their cries rising like a storm. Andromache collapsed. Priam tore his robes. Hecuba screamed a mother's scream. Their wails were not merely grief, they were the sound of a world breaking. Inside the roar of mourning, Achilles felt nothing. He was a man whose heart had been replaced by an open wound. He completed the circuit and returned to the Greek camp. Hector's body was barely recognizable, covered in dust and blood. Achilles stopped the chariot, slid off, and stood for a long moment staring at the corpse. "I will drag you every day," Achilles whispered, "until Patroclus is avenged." But the world around him shifted. Something vast stirred in the air, a presence older than Olympus, older than war itself. The gods, who had watched silently as mortals fought and fell, now leaned closer. Even they could not turn away from the depth of Achilles' anguish. Night settled over the camp. Achilles returned to Patroclus' body and lay beside it, curling around his friend as though trying to keep him warm. His tears soaked the sand. His breath came in quiet shudders. He spoke softly, as if Patroclus could still hear him. "I killed Hector, but it changes nothing. You're still gone. And I am half a man without you." The stars glimmered faintly above him, fragile lights in a sky too large to care. Achilles closed his eyes and slept for the first time since Patroclus' death. In the quiet hours before dawn, the gods visited him. First came Aphrodite, lifting Hector's spirit so it would not feel pain. She touched the body, restoring some dignity to it, even as Achilles continued his daily vengeance. Then came Apollo, who restored the corpse each night, ensuring that no matter how long Achilles dragged it, it would not decay. Not because he pitied Achilles, because he pitied Hector. And finally, there came a whisper among the gods, a whisper that traveled through Olympus and down into the mortal world. Priam must go. The old king of Troy must walk into the Greek camp alone, into the tent of the man who killed his son, and kneel. When dawn arrived, Achilles woke to silence. His grief was a weight he carried effortlessly now, so familiar it had become a part of him. He rose, washed his face, and went again to his chariot. He tied Hector's body behind it, climbed aboard, and dragged the corpse once more around the camp. Dust rose. Men watched. The gods sighed. And far away, in Troy's inner chambers, Priam stood trembling. The old king's hands shook as he clasped them behind his back. His hair, once dark, was now a cascade of silver. His face bore lines carved by grief, not age. His heart felt like a fragile piece of pottery clinging to its last crack. He whispered to his wife, "I must go." Hecuba's eyes widened in terror. "Go? To him? He is a monster now, a storm in human form." Priam shook his head slowly. "He is a man who has lost what I have lost." Tears spilled down Hecuba's cheeks. "Achilles will kill you." "Perhaps," Priam said. "But even death is easier than this, not burying my child." He covered Hector's armor with trembling hands. "Help me gather gifts," Priam said softly. Riches that might soften a heart turned to stone. When the sun dipped toward the horizon, Priam set out, not with a chariot, not with guards, not with soldiers, alone, led by Hermes, who disguised himself as a mortal boy, guiding the old king across the enemy lines unseen. The Greek sentries did not notice. The dogs did not bark. The fires did not flare. Fate itself, it seemed, stepped aside. Priam entered Achilles' tent. The young warrior sat on the ground, lost in thought, polishing his spear with movements too gentle for the rage that lived inside him. Priam stepped forward. His voice trembled. "Achilles," he whispered, "I come to you as a father." Achilles lifted his head. He froze. The old king walked further, each step a prayer for mercy, each breath a plea to fate. "Think of your own father," Priam said. "Think of Peleus, who will never see you return home, and pity me." Achilles stared. The air thinned. Priam fell to his knees and clasped Achilles' hands between his own. "Give me my son," Priam begged, "so I may bury him, so I may honor him, so I may find peace." Achilles' breath hitched. Priam's touch was warm, human, breaking through the storm. The old man looked into his face, tears streaking down his cheeks. "I kissed the hand," Priam whispered, "of the man who killed my child." Achilles' heart cracked. A sound escaped him, a sound softer than a sob, deeper than grief, more human than anything he had felt in years. He saw his own father in Priam's eyes. He saw himself in Hector. He saw the cost of vengeance in every wrinkle on the old king's face. And he wept. Achilles wept, not with rage, not with fury, but with the trembling sorrow of a young man who had carried too much for too long. He pulled Priam close. "Forgive me," Achilles whispered. "Forgive me." Priam sobbed into Achilles' shoulder, and the two men, enemies, bound by loss, held each other while the world watched and quietly remembered what it meant to be human. Achilles rose. He went to Hector's body, lifted it gently, cleaned it with careful hands. For the first time since Patroclus died, Achilles' touch was soft. He placed Hector's body into Priam's cart with solemn reverence. Then he whispered, "He will not be harmed again. I swear it." Priam nodded, tears falling freely. "Thank you," the old king said, voice shaking with gratitude. Achilles stepped back and watched the cart roll into the darkness, guided once more by Hermes, heading toward a city that would soon mourn its greatest son. The tent grew silent. Achilles stood alone, bathed in the soft glow of firelight. He felt empty. He felt cleansed. He felt unbearably mortal. Patroclus' death still ached like an open wound. But something in him had shifted. Something had softened. Something had begun to heal. And though his fate still approached, quiet, certain, inescapable, Achilles, for this brief moment, allowed himself to breathe.